Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to week 10. Okay, so tonight we are looking at early childhood teachers as change agents. And we're going to look at some of the research that was included in the readings this week. We're going to look at how lifelong learning and professional development play a very important role here in teacher as change agent, and also in supporting your future endeavours and your practice. So in terms of our overview this evening, we're going to look at teacher as change agent. We're going to have a look at mindset, professional development, and also resilience. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Okay. It's my daughter. Go away. Okay, so teacher as change agent, it is all about your sense of purpose, so your drive to improve and to change your practice as necessary. So from talking to many of you over the last weeks, many of you have actually completed the unit with the hope of adapting your future approaches to early years curriculum and pedagogy in your actual learning environments. So for some, this is your current context, and for others, it might be your future teaching context. So being a change agent, it's all about, it's about the difference that you want to make in your teaching. So it's also about identifying all the tools and also the attitude needed to prepare you to engage and implement productive change. So this change could be as an individual, and it could also be collaboratively with parents and colleagues. So this session, we're going to be focusing on you as a change agent and how to support these changes through the developing of resilience and skills to support you in your future endeavours. So who of you here tonight, we've got 10 participants, would you consider yourselves as change agents? In your current practices, would you consider yourself as a change agent? Who is currently working in an early years setting? Come on, let's get started with a bit of discussion. Let's unpack what teacher as change agent actually means to you. Sabrina, you're in an early years setting at the moment, aren't you?
No, I'm actually working for a university, so not quite related. But yeah, hopefully next year. Okay. Can't wait.
All right, who else here this evening is working in an early years setting?
I am to an extent, but yeah. I'm a specialist teacher across the whole of prep to 10. And so I love working with my little people. It's nice having them back this week, but I don't feel I play a major role in their life when I've only got them for a couple of hours a week. My time and my efforts are spread across the whole school, not just in that lower end.
So I guess you would you consider yourself a change agent in your school overall? So, you know,
overall in the school, absolutely. Like, I'm pioneering subjects that we've never done before, and when I leave at the end of this semester, they won't be continuing either. But yeah, perhaps not to individual students or classes, because I take them as multi-age groups for only a small portion of time.
I liked that phrase that you used, a pioneer. And I think for some of us, you know, teaching's been around for forever, and many of you have probably been teaching for a long time, but things change so consistently, and we're always looking at new ways to support our students, whether it be day to day or in changing circumstances or considering diversity. So and especially in the current circumstances, we are pioneers in a lot of ways. So, you know, that is a really nice way of defining what a change agent is as well. Okay, so I've got the image of this lovely lady here. You will recognise her from the clips from the engagement activities this week. She features in quite a few of the clips that I use. And she's a wonderful person. And I don't know, I feel like I know her because I've listened to so many of her points of view. And we're going to unpack some of the clips that we asked you to watch this week that she featured in. So in terms of change in schools and developing resilience to support that. So to be, I guess, to be a change agent, Bandura stated that to be an agent is to intentionally make things happen by one's actions. So in line with this statement, teachers as change agents are open to change and they act accordingly. In Fullen's opinion, the teacher as change agent is a professional who, to be effective, must become a career-long learner. So a career-long learner of sophisticated pedagogies and technologies. So that's a really good statement. I think that really does sum it up. So such a teacher that we're describing here is able to form and reform productive collaborations with colleagues, with parents, and also with the community. So if we want what's best for children growing into the 21st century, we have to be willing to seek out and be part of this perpetual transformation in our profession, because it is always changing and we're always adapting as teachers. So the four general characteristics from my readings of change agent have mainly been described in the areas of lifelong learning, of mastery of skills, entrepreneurship is a really important one, and of course collaboration. So they're the four main areas when we're talking about change agents. They're the characteristics that I guess are essential in terms of being a change agent. So again, in 21st century teaching and learning, the term pedagogy, as we've outlined previously, it refers not only to our strategies, styles, or approaches to teaching, but also to the ability to manage transformation. So whether individual or social, structural, or institutional. So to adapt our pedagogy to circumstances as they unfold. So in our current climate, this is the perfect example of teachers adapting their practices and their approaches to support students' learning within their diverse contexts and within their situations, and recognising social injustices that may impact their learning. So, for example, the vast majority of households with children, they have broadband internet, or NBN, but there are still really big disparities by income, by race, and of course the educational level of parents as well. Lots of different disparities there. Many of you, for example, have shared that those of you who are working and teaching at the moment, you've shared that you've been doing things like preparing and sending home individual paper-based learning packages, so to support those students that don't have access to internet, so to differentiate for those individuals. Are there any other kinds of practices that you've been using in these times? So adapting your approaches to the circumstances. Would anyone like to share anything that they've been doing at the moment? No?
Happy to share, Angela.
Thank you.
In my school, which is a P6 school with approximately 1,100 children, our pedagogy before was quite structured. We had certain programs in place, so we used Tegety for phonemic awareness, and everything was really structured. So when all of a sudden we went to online and off-site learning, we found we couldn't actually continue using those programs. Initially, it was more to do with access, because we had sent out a survey with the amount of children that didn't have devices or internet connection. So for our teachers, it was a total shift for thinking and almost starting fresh and creating this whole new pedagogy. You know, what they did and knew before all of a sudden became completely different. We still, you know, have our vision at our school is high expectations and explicit teaching. So we, as the leadership team, still tried to, you know, instill that we wanted the learning. You know, we had high expectations for the teaching and the learning. So it took us some time to develop what our lessons would look like and what resources we would use and what pedagogy or pedagogical approach we would use to still deliver quality learning experiences. So it kind of felt like it was back to, you know, 10, 15 years ago, thinking about what would engage the children, because obviously a lot of them didn't have a lot of support at home. Our platform was a Blackboard, but we also wrote our lessons so that they suited children online and offsite. So something as simple as at the bottom of the lesson, if it was take a photo of your work and email this to your teacher, but we had also provided book packs for every single child. And if they didn't have a device or internet, they could do the work in their book pack, and the message would say, or put this into your book pack and share it with your teacher at a later date. And when the children in Prep and Year 1 came back this week, they brought those book packs in and got to share their work.
Catherine, that sounds like a huge amount of work.
Yeah, these bags under my eyes are not makeup.
And this is in a very short period of time too. Yeah. So how much time did you actually have to adapt those pedagogical approaches and what you were actually doing in your lessons?
So we started, obviously we, you know, had an indication that things could lean towards a closure. So in week 8 of term 1, we pulled all of our teacher leaders, so the year level coordinators, offline. Sort of talked about, you know, how we would approach possible school closure and still deliver learning experiences. We then, once we in week 10 found out that we would be closing, we had those 5 days. We pulled another team off, we called them our Blackboard managers, and they were building the platform. So they had all of the knowledge of how to do that, so that our teachers could just solely focus on writing the lessons. We wrote just 1 week at a time. So week 10 of term 1, by the end of that 5 days of teacher student free days, we had a week's worth of learning written. We, as a leadership team, put in processes for approval of those lessons. So there'd be a delegate from each year level. So one teacher would be responsible for the phonemic awareness lessons. They would submit those lessons to myself or one of the other curriculum leaders, and we would give suggested edits or, you know, help them and give them feedback on how they could improve the lessons. And if I'm being honest, so week 1 and 2, bit rough. Lessons weren't probably, you know, the quality that we expected, but every week we gave more and more feedback. And so today we just compiled our next week's worth of learning. And I have to say, we finally got it right. So yeah, it took time.
Yeah, these things do. And, you know, I guess during the pandemic, as well as needing to be reflective, adaptive and collaborative, all of the things that you've just been describing, you guys have been so and also being, it would have had an interest on yourself or families. The amount of time it dedicates, being would have been an issue. But as well, all of these things, as you're saying, you're actually needing to reinvent best practice. For this particular circumstance, what is best practice in this situation? So, really needing to adapt all of those pedagogical approaches for individual students and for their circumstance. So, an amazing effort. And, we've got thousands and thousands of teachers that are doing this at the moment. So, it's a really good example for this particular resilience. Picking up is a huge. Thinking about this, I want you to think about what your focus for assessment 2 is. You all have very different focuses, and I want you to reflect for a moment on what kind of emotions you would be feeling when endeavouring to make the intended changes in your learning environment. So this may be changes that you want to make now or possibly in the future. So what emotions would you be experiencing in terms of making these changes? You don't have to share. I just want you to take a moment to have a think about it. Have my internet, I think, is a little bit unstable. Are you able to hear me okay at the moment? Yes? Jessica, can you hear me okay? Yeah, good. Just give me a thumbs up if it's okay, or a thumbs down if it's not in throughout, because I have been having a little bit of difficulty with the internet. So the sorts of emotions that you would be experiencing, and I guess some of the things that Catherine was talking about, so many, when you're looking at making major changes, you've got positive emotions. So that excitement of a new challenge. You've got inspiration from learning new things, but you've also got those negative things like the fear of the reaction from colleagues and parents. Because, for most of us, there often is resistance to change, and this is very normal. We would also be thinking about emotions in terms of how these changes might impact the children. You might have concerns about time management, lack of motivation, development of appropriate new skills, development or thinking about your skills as a communicator, because that's going to be essential in terms of collaboration, which again, Catherine talked about. There was a lot of collaboration with other teachers and reflection that she discussed. So yeah, that development of all of the knowledge and new skills to support critical reflection and discussion with colleagues, and also technologies as well. So there's lots of emotions there that you would be possibly experiencing. And I think moving into your action plan and your professional development plan, I think these are things that you should be considering and writing about as well. And in the engagement activities, it was suggested that you watch those 5 brief clips of the early childhood teacher, the director, discussing those initial challenges with implementing changes to the introduction of the kindergarten guidelines. So she really did talk about emotions and strategies to assist in implementing changes to the curriculum. Did anyone get the opportunity to have a look at the clips? Anyone there? So what were some of the things that she mentioned? What were some of the strategies that she talked about that she was using with her colleague? Can you remember some of those strategies that she thought about? Because these are things that will be quite relevant to you in making changes in your environment. So there were things like taking your time. She mentioned small steps are really important, and I think in terms of change, that is very important. Having a go, finding time, that's a really critical factor for teachers, like finding time. Catherine is saying that she liked the sharing board that they used. So a really lovely way of encouraging parents to get involved. So also things like thinking about the comfort levels of staff. So people will react to change in different ways, and we need to take that into consideration. There will be varying perspectives about what you're doing. Some people may be resistant. Their pedagogical beliefs may be very different to yours. So you really need to take everyone's understandings and beliefs into consideration. So again, these are the sorts of things that you would be reflecting on. So yeah, learning takes time. Invest in unpacking all of the documents. Some good suggestions there in the chat, Catherine. So very importantly, that all of these changes, anything that we do, needs to be supported by professional development and workshops. And I guess very importantly, we need to all be committed to the change as well as a team. So it is about collaborative practices. Would you agree? Yep, so Tsering was saying she liked how they involve parents to see how play-based approaches helps in the learning. Yeah. Okay, so all of this involves commitment, it involves motivation, furthering our knowledge and our understandings. But I guess, of course, there's definitely a place for resistance in the process of change, as we can see here in this Lunig image. Sometimes change, it can be met with adversity, with possibly an imbalance between joy and reward, and disappointment and risk as well. So if not kept in check, this imbalance can actually lead to burnout. And I do worry about a lot of teachers at the moment, just with what they're going through, and I am hoping that schools are considering the well-being of teachers and keeping that in mind. This, of course, in this situation with change, this is where a growth mindset is vital. It's absolutely essential in terms of any kind of change. So the process of change, it involves generating new ideas, gaining support for these ideas when you're implementing them in practice. So this really does, as we discussed, it requires a high level of effort and, of course, resilience. So it involves moving from that fixed mindset of resistance and negativity for some to the growth mindset of change and possibility as well. So it often involves embracing that with, the disruption that is often involved in change. And it's also about accepting that mistakes are going to be made in the process of change, but this can add to the ongoing learning and development as well. So mistakes, they can create opportunities to generate further new ideas and motivate further change as well. So it's all about that switch in the mindset. So this comes when we start considering problems as challenges. So the situation not being a problem, but being a challenge to overcome and learn from as well. So again, these are some of the things that I really want you to think about in terms of your professional development action plan. So not just the process, it's all about the mindset as well. And of course, it's about resilience. So we talk about resilience a lot. Not just in teaching, but in many, many fields, especially fields that involve caring. So resilience, it's the capacity to persevere under adversity, or to bounce back after setbacks. So if we look at resilience, I love this image here. If we look at resilience as a multi-dimensional framework to support change, we can identify 4 different dimensions, so 4 distinct dimensions. So Mansfield, Beltman, Price and McConey, I've got the full reference in the reference list for you. They investigated how graduating and early career teacher, how they perceived resilient teachers. So the teachers that they observed in their learning environments. So quantitative survey data collected from 200 teachers indicated that their views of resilience developed according to their career stage. So resilience for some was demonstrated through persistence in overcoming challenges, so the motivational dimension, or for others, being adaptable and having a range of strategies to support practice, so the professional related dimension, or the ability to laugh, to have a happy attitude and to look after your well-being, the emotional dimension. And then for others, it was about building supportive and trusting relationships. So that really essential social dimension that is so important to us as teachers. So the responses from the participants in the study, it really showed that teacher resilience is typically thought of as linked to and also manifested within particular contexts. So with school culture being an integral factor. So in terms of change, I think you might actually need to consider how this is encouraged and supported in your context. Is that something you need to consider in your action plan, in your professional development plan? For example, who might you need to convince to enact the changes that you're thinking about? So it's not just about you, it's going to be very much about your context and your colleagues, the parents, and also how those changes might impact on the children in the environment. So again, something that I would like you to reflect on in terms of this action plan. So to be a change agent, as well as being resilient or needing to be resilient, it also requires dedication to ongoing learning and professional development. So that is why we've got this focus on your professional development plan. So an important part of developing an inquiry stance in your professional development and teaching practice, it involves having solid knowledge of practice, knowledge in practice, and knowledge for practice. So with this awareness, teachers within an inquiry frame of mind, they're able to take more control of their learning. So as discussed, I'm not sure who had the opportunity to have a read of the Cochrane, Smith and Lytle reading this week, but it was very much about developing an inquiry habit of mind. Essentially, saying that the habit of, it's all about having the habit of developing and valuing deep learning. So that was very much the focus. So in this sense, teachers learn when they generate that local knowledge of practice, so within their context, by working within inquiry communities to theorise, to construct their work, and to connect it to those larger social, cultural and political issues. So it's about seeing learning and inquiry not just within your space, but looking at the broader picture as well. All of the other influences and impacts on your learning and the needs in your learning context. So Timperley suggests that any professional learning should start with teachers asking themselves direct and focused questions. So questions about what students need to know and do. So on the slide are the questions that Timperley suggests. So things like what knowledge and skills do children need to meet curricular, personal and social goals? What do students and children already know? What sources of evidence have we used and how adequate are they? And what do they need to learn and do? And importantly, how do we build on what they already know? So answering these questions, it really does require focused assessment and learning. So any changes that you want to develop, that you want to enact, there needs to be a basis for that. And that basis will be the students, the children in your learning environment and that particular context. So educational leaders, teachers, they really need to know and understand and agree on how to gather detailed information about the knowledge and the skills of individuals, of the groups of children, to determine what is limiting their learning, or what is getting in the way of their learning, or what the next steps are to assist them with engagement. So it's wonderful to have ideas, but you need to have a basis for them as well. So if you haven't done so yet, I'd really like you to have a look at the Cochrane Smith and Lytle reading this week. Any questions at all about using those questions? I think it's a really good framework for an inquiry stance. And again, something that you might want to consider in terms of, data collection and observation in your early years environments. So we've discussed communities of inquiry before, but I think I just wanted to reflect on it again, especially in terms of thinking about your action plan, your second piece of assessment, because really effective learning environments, they're characterised by interdependent relationships. So relationships that we said before, as well as resilience, they promote and create a really strong culture of learning and a supportive culture as well. So these relationships take place between teachers and children, amongst children, and between children and also the broader community. So that really strong culture of learning, a culture of inquiry. Importantly, as it says on the slide, I think it's important teachers improve their practice in the company of their colleagues, that it is collaborative, that you do move forward with any change together as a team. I do think that for far too long, many teachers have worked in isolation with only brief or rare interludes to discuss professional learning. So this has been evident, I think, in some of the conversations we've had in our Zoom sessions around critical reflection. So, you know, it's really hard to find the time to reflect critically, to enact change. Time is also, it's a really big factor. So time and resources are really needed to support these practices, to support any changes in pedagogical approaches. As we discussed previously, you know, it was a very quick turnaround with all of the changes needed for teachers to move into online learning environments. And this was the same in higher education as well. I think as lecturers, as academics, we had a week to change everything onto an online platform, and a lot of people needed to to attend professional development as well, because they didn't actually have the skills to use these particular platforms. So research is very clear that learning improves when teachers, when the learning happens in the learning environment. So teacher leadership, they need to provide consistent support to make sure that teachers do have those opportunities to learn and share with each other. So have any of you actually considered this in your action plan? I'm not sure. I think Meg may have mentioned this to me, that she was thinking about how she might promote collaborative practices as part of her professional development plan. Is that right, Meg?
Yes, I was thinking for probably a little bit of a longer term plan for me, for being a mentor and taking a bit of a leadership step in that. Yeah, but I have some things to work on. So yeah.
What about, excellent, yeah. So so when you say you've got some things to work on, is there anything specific, any goals that you have?
I would probably do some more research. I was a nominated supervisor before, and my temperament is to please others. So I found I probably need to do a bit of work on myself and my resilience and my confidence, which I think I mentioned in a previous workshop, that my previous director really tried to help me with that, because I would put things forward and she would really try and pick me up. Like every time I put in my termly ebook, I would give a caveat saying, oh, this was this or this was that. And she said, your writing's actually really good, but every time you try and put something with it, or when I had to, I also have a fear of public speaking in front of groups of adults. So I'd have to probably do some work on that.
But these are fabulous points, Meg, and these are all things that I'm looking forward to reading about in professional development plan. They're all, you know, I would suggest that you have a look at some of those studies that I've mentioned this evening, and just to unpack them and pull out some things that might be significant to you, especially in terms of that well-being, and, you know, to think about some of the things that we have discussed this evening. You know, some of those really important issues concerning resilience and concerning having time and encouraging inquiry-based reflective collaboration. Very important in moving forward, especially if in your learning environment you're not necessarily in a position to approve or enact some of those fairly major changes that I know some of you are thinking about. Is there anyone else who would like to share some of the thoughts on that collaborative practice that they might be interweaving in their professional development plan?
Something that I wrote in my assignment, I'm doing something to do with play-based learning. And one of the things that I spoke about was how, like for instance, in my context as a prep teacher, I can't be the only one implementing play-based learning while the classes.
You're cutting out Eleanor, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry. My internet's not working very well.
I think a lot of
Is
people
that any better?
yeah, that's good. That's much better. Sorry, you were saying play-based
Okay.
learning. Yeah. You there? Oh, I think you're freezing. Oh dear. And that sounded
Oh,
like
sorry.
a very
My
good
internet's
point.
going really badly. I don't know if this is
Oh
going to work.
dear. Yeah. No, we're having a lot of difficulty hearing what you're saying. That's unfortunate. Anyone else who wanted to share their thoughts on collaboration?
My first assignment, and hence this one, is around age-appropriate pedagogies, especially down our Prep 1-2 end of the school. And I think where we need to focus as a school is continuity of skills within our school. We are very, very small. We only have 70 students across Prep to 10, and we are a remote school. So we get teachers come out, do their 3 years of rural service, get their permanency, transfer back to the coast. So we have teachers come out on this 3-year cycle. So as a result, every 3 years, and this is the year, we've got all the freshies this year, we lose 75% of our staff. And so we were lucky enough a few years ago to be, I think in my first year of teaching, maybe we were the pilot school or a pilot school for AAP. And we did amazing things with it, except a year later, we lost all those staff that did all of the training and put everything in place. So I think we need to find a way to share the skills that we've learnt previously. That way, when we have this high turnover every 3 years, there's some sort of consistency still in the skills that do remain at the school, especially in terms of the students as well, because what we find is that when you get the fresh batch in, they bring in all these different ideas and pedagogies, but the kids aren't used to it. They need a bit of continuity as well in the approaches that we're using.
Some extremely good points there, Jessica, and you're not alone. This is something, especially in our more distant schools, rural schools, where you do tend to get a lot of beginning teachers that only last for a small period of time and then move on. And I feel for you.
And everyone in leadership out here is absolutely fantastic, but we have the same issue with leadership, both at a school and at a district and regional level, is that people come out this way in order to get a leadership role. They get that on their resume, but what they're aiming for is to get back to the coast in a bigger leadership role. And so even when leadership comes out at a school or regional level, they have a new flavour of the month that they want to put in as well. So even on a 2 or 3 year cycle, we're changing what our big regional focuses are based on who our leadership is in the region as well.
That's excellent. Thank you, Jessica. I think that's something that others might like to consider, those of you here tonight, and also those of you listening. So continuity. So you may have ideas, you may want to put them in place, but how long are they going to last for? How are you going to support that ongoing use of these changes and pedagogical approaches? Of course, as we know, they may change due to circumstance, but there is nothing worse than for young children for changes to be implemented within 3 or 4 months, or then something new to come in again. So we need to think about the impact that these changes, these approaches are going to have on our students, and can we sustain them long term? A really, really good point, Jessica. Thank you so much for that.
Angela, I can add to that if I've got time.
Please do, definitely.
So I think I've spoken before, and I know it's probably a pretty rare, I'm fortunate to belong to a really great school that truly does value the professional development of its teachers and a collaborative learning environment. So we have, and I've said before, our 90 minutes a week. We call it a HIP session. So it's Hubs Innovating on Pedagogy and Performance. We are able to afford that time because we have specialist teachers teaching all of the strands of the arts. We have 2 technology teachers, we have 3 PE teachers. So whilst those the children are at specialist lessons, the teachers are in these HIP sessions, plus they still get their 2 hours of non-contact on top of that. And I think for us, Jess, if this helps you too, it's about the timing and not to rush into change. We've been in a reading inquiry that's we're 18 months into this inquiry. So any change that we put in place or anything that we're investing in, we make sure it's sustainable. Everybody is involved in the process, and we too have been a really fast growing school. We had 280 new enrolments in term 4 last year, just in one term. So with that comes new teachers every year. We get a lot of new graduates every year, but we find that, you know, the policies and the processes and the culture of the school is so strong that people very quickly are able to come on board. And because the changes are happening over a period of time, nothing's too quick. Nothing, you know, is sort of put in place one year and then quickly thrown out the next. So for us, it's been about, is this sustainable? How are we going to, you know, achieve our goals over a period of time and not rushing into it? But obviously the collaborative, you know, HIP sessions with our teachers as well is what helps us to be able to do that.
You're very lucky, Catherine. I agree. Having that, the supportive leadership is essential, isn't it? But I do love your thoughts on staggering the change and really looking at how you're going to introduce time frames. Again, something that I think you should all be thinking about. And it segues very nicely onto our next slide. So last week I posed the question whether you would be thinking about short-term plans or long-term plans, or possibly both, moving forward with your professional development plans. So just what Jessica and Catherine were talking about, time frames. So do you need to stagger? Do you need, you know, all of your decisions need to be based around supporting those students, and not all students, you know, clumped together. We're talking about individual students as well. So taking stock of diversity within the environment and how those changes might impact on individual students, whether it be social, emotional, cognitive, it could be, you know, cultural as well. So all of those considerations that you need to think about. So some other questions that I posed for you last week, some further questions. Is anyone at the point, you're probably well beyond reflecting on these now, but things like what you're going to do to extend your knowledge and inform your practice, what do you need to know? So these are all to support your decisions about moving forward. What are you curious about? What do you want to change, improve, challenge about your practice and your understandings? How will you explore new ideas, practices, knowledges, and approaches? And what support, I think from tonight we can add, what support do you need, and how will the children and colleagues in your environment, what support will they need as well? So something to move on with, to take with you away from this session. Any questions or comments about any of those in terms of your plans? Any thoughts? No? Okay. So next week's Zoom session, I'm going to follow the same format as we did last term. So next week's session will give you the opportunity to ask any final questions around the last 4 weeks of content, and possibilities to share your progress and ask specific questions about your focus. So this will be before your final big push to get your professional development plan in on Friday, May 29th. A reminder that I don't record these sessions, the consolidation and assessment support sessions, mainly because it's very much about individual students and the specific task that they're going to be doing. So it's a nice opportunity to come along and to listen in on what others are doing as well. But I like to give everyone the opportunity to do it without the knowledge of them being recorded, because I think that's an important factor. But if you are unable to come, if you do want to but you're not able to, I will of course be available via email or phone if necessary, if you are unable to attend. So that week 11 and also week 12 are open up as well. So there are some, I have put some tasks there in week 11 that can follow on to week 12, some readings and some engagement activities if you're wanting to actually do them. Sort of more about moving into the future, but I do believe most of you will be focusing very much on moving forward and finishing off that final assessment task. Any questions at all? So next week it will be our final Zoom session. And then that final week will be independent study. So as always, oh, sorry.
Sorry, it's Meg. Sorry, Angela. I actually am on my phone now. I apologise. I missed some of the session because my internet died. But I'm just curious if it's needed, if you can still get extensions at this time.
Yeah, you should be able to. Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, just depending on your circumstances, I'm not sure. I don't think I really couldn't tell you if they will have the COVID, you know, how you could get the week extension. I'm not sure if they're going to do that again. I couldn't answer that, Meg, but you definitely, if you do have other circumstances, you will be able to.
It's generally for my mum again. So, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think you should be fine, Meg. It shouldn't be an issue.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
No worries. So I've got lots of references there too, just in terms of what we was discussed and put forward in this evening's session. So I'm happy for you to use those and refer to them in your assessment task. Okay. And if you do have any questions about them as well, feel free to email me. So then, as per usual, I stop our share and I put it into Brady Bunch mode. So for those of you who do want to stay on for a little bit and have a chat, and what I always do as well is I am going to stop the recording and remind those of you who are listening to the recording to email me if you have any questions. Let's give them all a little wave. Hello to those of you watching at home. Good evening.